All right, so hello everyone, and welcome to the U.S. Department of Energy 2023 Build Challenge Discovery session. We have about 20 people on the call, and so we'd love for this to be somewhat interactive and provide an opportunity for conversations, questions, or other types of activities. So if you can, please open up your Zoom chat and let us know who you are and what organization you're with. So what collegiate institution or department, that type of information. So we're excited just to see who's here. And I think we can tailor our conversation today to what you're interested in. So with that, we'll see a few names come through, but to introduce ourselves, my name is Joe Simon. I'm currently the Build Challenge Competition Manager for the U.S. Department of Energy Solar Decathlon at the National Renewable Energy Lab. And I also have a history of being a student from the competition as well, who was on the 2017 for the University of Illinois, helping to do renderings, construction drawings, hang drywall, and be present giving tours to the public, and then helped lead a student team in 2009. I've also had the privilege of being able to see some of the international programs in person and support some of those activities. So seeing the unique approach to different regional needs or regional activities. With that, I'm supported by a number of people here at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Michael Young and Taylor Ryan are both on, and they may be able to say hello in a moment, but we're also joined by Holly Carr with the U.S. Department of Energy. Holly, do you want to say hello?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Holly Carr. I'm in the Building Technologies office here at U.S. Department of Energy and have been a longtime fan of the Solar Decathlon and now get to work with the team at NREL as the director of the program. So welcome to all of you. We're really glad to have you here and excited to be in conversation with you about this opportunity for your students. Thanks.
Great. So thank you for those of you who have already done so. So I see Kurt with University of Central Florida, Jody with Marywood University, Rob with Rochester Institute of Technology, Matt with Cornell University. Also like seeing your history of competition for these different areas. Liam for Mississippi State University, Anthony for UCSD, Hassam for Penn State Harrisburg, Kathy with E2S LLC and some history with sustainability, Jody for UCSD, Steve for UCSD, Christina for LTU, and now focused on passive house activities, Max with Jefferson University and Drexel University. So it's really great to see such a wide variety of schools participating. If you haven't already done so, please let us know your name and the school or institution that you're with. For the conversation today, I hope to spend just about 20 minutes talking at you and then have about 40 minutes where we're able to talk with you. What are you considering? What are your concerns? What uncertainties can we help address? With that, I'll turn it over to Holly to give us a brief overview of why we're here and what we are looking forward to coming in the future. For those of you who are just joining, I see a few more people coming from the waiting room. Let us know your name and the university with which or organization with which you're associated. Welcome, everyone. Holly?
Thanks, Joe. So I'm going to start at the very beginning. For folks who may not be familiar with Solar Decathlon, although I know a number of you on the call are extremely familiar with Solar Decathlon, but the Solar Decathlon is a student design competition initiated in 2002. So next year will be our 20th anniversary for Solar Decathlon. And we have always been all about the students here at Solar Decathlon. And the goal is really to build a workforce of folks who are able to design and build super high performance buildings, low carbon buildings powered by renewables. And so as many of you know, we have both a design challenge and a build challenge. This particular call is really going to be focused on the build challenge, so taking that design all the way from concept to completion, and the structure and format for the 2023 event. Joe, you can move on to the next slide if you would. Okay. So as you know, as you may know, this is a decathlon, which means we have 10 contests that students are competing to be successful in. And for the decathlon, we really find that our teams need to be successful in all of those 10 contests in order to win the competition. They don't have to win every single contest, but generally they need to be successful in all 10. And that's really the beauty of the competition is designing and building a well-rounded home that meets not just the energy performance needs, but also the occupants' needs for comfort and usability and reliability. And so forth. So, Joe, did you want to cover these details, or shall I go over the program? Okay.
Sure. So I can speak to this. So generally, as Holly mentioned, thanks Holly, we have 10 contests, and in the build challenge, those are each worth 100 points, and the team with the most points at the end of the competition wins. But like Holly said, we often see teams win in some contests, but they don't get first place in every one of those different areas. And so there's different focuses, there's different strengths, there's different opportunities each school is able to participate in. And so for those of you who are joining from different perspectives, we also have our design challenge, in which about 100 teams per year work across these 7 different divisions, ranging from suburban single family to retail buildings, office buildings, elementary school, mixed use multifamily, and more. And in that competition, teams can work over 1 or 2 semesters to go through that design activity. And then in the build challenge, we're now functioning under a structure in which we're tasking teams to build locally and compete nationally. We see a great opportunity both for targeted expenses, limited impact on the environment from travel and from transportation of the home itself, and to really meet the needs of your own local or regional partners, and to show how these homes can work at scale, to show how they could be adopted in a really regionally specific, climate specific, and goal specific environment. As you may have seen from the 2021 competition that just concluded, we're excited about all the new ways in which we can engage with people virtually, as we can do so by gathering judges and students together, hopefully more than was allowed under COVID times, but still gather people together, but show what these homes can do from this distributed environment. For 2023, we have 10 contests, and we're always looking to compete in these 10 contests and update them to respond to the interests and needs for research for students and other areas. This is a competition that's open to anyone who would like to participate. So just as we saw in the build challenge that just concluded, we are open to international participation as well. So if you would like to build a home in your own community, whether it's overseas, in South America, in Latin America, or anywhere else that you would like, you're more than welcome to do so. And we think that this Build Local, Compete Nationally opportunity provides high opportunities for visibility, unique pairing of innovation and collaboration within the Solar Decathlon community. So for our 10 contests for 2023, we have some staples like you've seen before, architecture and engineering, but we're also tasking our teams to think about embodied environmental impact of their design, of their approach, of these different areas, to think about durability and resilience. Will this home be built to last? Will it respond to any changing climate environments? In our measured contest activities, we're looking at things like integrated performance, occupant experience, comfort and environmental quality, and energy performance, really thinking about grid interactive, efficient buildings, to think about how lighting impacts not just temperature or occupant comfort, but safety or other areas. How can you integrate all these different areas together? Next slide. So as we look at the 2023 Build Challenge, we just concluded our 2020 Build Challenge about 2 weeks ago. And we're now in this phase, excited to have this conversation with you, where it's time to think about your participation, build support in your community, build support from your university leadership, find a design partner, find a client who might want to have the home that you're able to build and exhibit. Particularly in this Build Challenge activity for 2023, you may have a long-term client who's funding the project from day one, and you're able to integrate your students and your faculty's research, innovation, and ideas into that platform for a long-term use with limited extra funds required. We do expect to close the application phase in the fall of 2021 so that students and teams can go through the design phase throughout the 2021 and 2022 academic year. When we conclude the competition event in April of 2022, in parallel with the 2022 Design Challenge, we're expecting teams to present their work to date, and we expect to be able to award 20 teams funding to advance to the construction phase. This funding will be provided as a prize without limitations that could be used for products, that could be used for student stipends, that could be used for foundations, that could be used for upgrades, solar presentations, or other areas, so that you have what's necessary in addition to whatever partnership you're able to raise to go through construction. Maybe you're digging foundations in the summer of 2022 so that students can be really integrated with construction in the fall of 2022, with construction completed by early 2023, so we can measure and exhibit the houses in your own community and they can be presented to judges in spring of 2023. As you're joining, I saw some of our names come through. If you haven't already done so, we'd love to know what school you're associated with or what institution and your name. So please feel free to put that in the chat. We have a wide range of people already joined. Next slide. So what are we expecting? As I've mentioned previously, for 2023, we are focused on an all local build. No transportation of the house or National Mall exhibition, but we are expecting to gather students and faculty together, for example, on the National Renewable Energy Campus for presenting to judges, learning from each other, and a really great interactive environment. We do expect teams to have some type of industry partners who help them succeed. This may be helping with construction. It may be a client who ends up buying the house. It may be someone who helps with design, but we don't expect any team to be able to do this entirely on their own. Our approach for 2023 is that all applicants would be accepted into the design phase. So while we do have some requirements that we're expecting for the fall application close, where you tell us a little bit about what you're planning, all teams would be expected to participate. And then ultimately, up to 20 teams would be selected to receive funding in the form of a prize from the Department of Energy in April of 2022. And that would be $50,000 per team. As mentioned, that could be used at your discretion. It could be used for student assistantships. It could be used for space on campus. It could be used for upgrading the home in ways in which you wouldn't otherwise be able to do for your particular client, or whatever else might be necessary. It could be used for travel to NREL, but we want this to be provided in April before most teams have begun construction, so that they're able to use that for whatever needs that they have before they've committed too many funds to this activity. We would expect that construction to begin in summer, maybe fall of 2022, and that measurements and exhibitions would occur in the spring of 2023. Ultimately, similar to what happened a few weeks ago, we would have jury presentations and winners announced alongside our design challenge competition in spring of 2023. Next slide. So how does a school build a house? How do you get from going to a design activity to actually building that? What makes a good project? Really what we see as making a good project is those that have a purpose, that have a particular set of constraints, and that really understand the strengths of that team, the faculty, and the community to really engage successfully. We'll talk a little bit about why it can be beneficial to an institution. Maybe you have interest in developing a design build program at your school. Maybe it's about connecting with more industry partners and employers in your own region. But how do you pay for all of this? Some of it will be individual donations of materials. Some of it may be university funds. Sometimes it's sustainability activities. Sometimes it's grants. But ultimately, things do cost money. It's not just student time. It's not just faculty time. And faculty time can cost money as well. Understanding what the long-term use of the structure can be can help you identify some funds that are reasonably able to be provided with limited trade-off because of the long-term use of the house in this new local build format. Sometimes though, those funds require direct cash expenses, particularly unique to the Solar Decathlon, and you need to identify ways that that could be done. There's many different approaches that have been taken by teams, and we're happy to talk about those throughout this presentation. Next. But recognize throughout all this activity, you can't do it alone. It does take a village, it does take a community. So think about why your school would want to participate, why your alumni relations department might want to be involved, or your development office at your university. Think about faculty. Maybe this can tie into existing research activities. Has there been a new type of insulation material developed, a new type of foundations or structural activity? Is there some research already funded around monitoring indoor air quality? Are there ways in which the building and built environment can support faculty with goals separate from educating the students as well? Why should students participate? Is this about hands-on learning? Is this about building their resumes? Is about helping the local community? Think about all the different ways that someone might be motivated and build that into the story for how you and your school might be able to participate successfully. Next. For the 2020 Build Challenge that recently concluded a few weeks ago, we saw a wide variety of approaches from our teams. If you haven't done so, you can explore these homes in our virtual village, where we created a Matterport 3D digital twin of each home, and you can learn more about their approaches. But in this first kind of prototype exhibition of the all local build format, I can tell you that all of these homes had a really unique target market, and it's a really unique long-term strategy for how the house was paid for, who's using it, and how it's going to benefit the community in which it was built. For Waterloo, this was a partnership with Habitat for Humanity, and it was built on a reservation, a First Nation reservation in Canada, and it really showcased what all electric zero energy living could be, jumpstarting some conversations with others in different band councils across Canada. For CU Boulder, this was kind of a design build partnership with a real client who provided the funds while the students went through the design, construction, and build activity. For Weber State, the university worked with the city to get a vacant piece of land, build the home, and it was ultimately sold on the general market to a number of people who were able to bid at the appraised value. And then one of the bidders was picked out of a hat, and they're now happily living in that home. Las Vegas is turning out to be a community space, positioned in a public garden and serving a long-term purpose focused on bringing people together. Chile is responding to a natural disaster and connecting some of these different areas, working with the social housing funds from Valparaiso to develop and showcase some of the innovations of the university in their heavy timber construction. Kansas State is a low-income housing project in St. John. Illinois is planning to provide their house to Habitat for Humanity, and University of Denver renovated a home that the university already owned. So I was thinking about taking the existing resource and doing something different than otherwise would have occurred. There's many different opportunities for you to think about, particularly in this local build activity. Next slide. So ultimately, I ask you to think about the power to change. If you want students and faculty to work together to build a home, can you reach a large and diverse audience? Can you have, COVID aside, thousands of house visits in your own community on your own campus? Could you conduct some real world or longer term faculty or student research? Could you create educational workshops? Could you use it as a recruiting tool? Could you connect with middle schools? Could you increase visibility for the university? Could you increase visibility for energy efficiency or some builder developer partners? Could this support the university and its goals for media attention or attracting new students? We've seen a lot of support and visibility with each edition, whether it's from industry, such as Applied Materials, Schneider, or similar, from media, or from the schools themselves. As we think more and more about reacting locally to immediate needs, I encourage you to think, what did your community need? What type of housing could be changed if your students and your faculty are able to integrate themselves into that process? Next slide. We see this positive reaction. It could help with sustainability leadership. It could help with recruiting new students. It could help with research and innovation. It could be a demonstration project. Really hands-on learning, learning by doing, or really getting multidisciplinary activities. Sometimes schools struggle to get engineering, interior design, communications, marketing, business, finance, and architecture all talking to each other. Maybe you have a partnership with the School of Teaching Health and want to understand how you can see an aging population. Can the built environment identify people falling? Can it identify health needs? Could you help people respond to any other concerns? When I was a student leading a team at the University of Illinois, and we were recruiting students, I would say that there's an opportunity for anyone, no matter their major, whether it's communications, industrial design, furniture design, art, health, communications, whatever that might be, architecture, engineering, all of these different areas can find something productive to do when developing some of these solutions. Next slide. And this can really serve as a long-term impact as well. Could it be a living lab? Could it keep telling the stories of your ideas? Could it be a long-term occupant? Could it be longer-term monitoring? Could you have ways in which the students could bring different mechanical systems every year for the next 10 years and think about how those operate in that environment? Do you want to understand moisture intrusion on your wall section? Maybe you can look at that. Maybe there's different partnerships of where these homes can go and what they can be. Next slide. For these students, can it be a life-changing opportunity? Can it be a community? With almost 40,000 alumni worldwide from our partners in Europe, from our partners in China, in India, in the United Arab Emirates, from Africa, from Latin America, there are students in almost every country, in almost every state that have participated and are willing to respond and connect for jobs, for mentorship, for engagement. And this hands-on learning with high visibility can be highly valued by employers, can help them understand how to bring concept to reality, and whether or not they end up working in the field as a tradesperson helping to hang drywall, swing a hammer, they understand how a building goes together, and that can benefit their career professionally for many years to come. Next slide. And so ultimately, I hope this can be a conversation. For those of you who have joined, if you have not yet done so, we can talk a little bit about who's on the call and introduce ourselves. But to succeed, we look forward for you being able to read the rules, which we will publish, think about a multidisciplinary team, think about communications, think about commitments from collegiate institution leadership. A faculty and one class of students won't be able to do this entirely successfully. You definitely benefit from support from the entire university. Think about industry partnerships. Is there a modular home building factory? Is there a local production builder? Is there an architect? Is there a association like Habitat for Humanity or similar who could take an existing product and make it better because of your involvement? And can you create a compelling and complete project that moves you through this process? We have a number of resources that are available for you to think about, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But recognize that in this competition, this was from a few years ago, there's a wide mix of participation. How can you succeed in some areas or all the areas? What's your strength as your university, and what story and problem are you trying to solve? In 2013, I believe, University of North Carolina at Charlotte really wanted to show off an innovation that they had developed at the university of 100% fly ash concrete. They recognized that it wasn't going to do very well in the affordability contest. They recognized that there were some challenges in one contest, but the demonstration of their innovation, of their research, of their execution led to a wide range of gains and benefits for the university as a whole, with follow-on funding, with additional staff, additional areas because of that real-world demonstration of university activities. Next slide. So ultimately, our timeline. We expect to release the full rules in July of 2021. We've received a ton of great lessons learned and feedback and suggestions based on the just now concluded 2020 Build Challenge, as well as the Design Challenge, and we'll absolutely be listening to any of your thoughts today. But for now, on solardecathlon.gov in the Build Challenge area, there's an explanation of intent. This is meant to be a simplified version of the rules that tells you what we're currently thinking and how we think we're going to execute measurements, how we're going to execute juries, student presentations, and timelines. If you have not yet read that document, I encourage you to do so. We expect to close registration in late 2021 in October, and we do have a nominal $100 application fee that helps us understand who's engaged, how this has been provided, and that it does support a number of things that Department of Energy simply legally can't pay for. Recognize that we will ask you to submit some build challenge proposal. So in the design challenge, you just register and you compete. But for build challenge in that October 2020 point of view, we're going to ask for some information about your concept, your team structure, what type of support you think you'll have. Recognize that your conceptual design could entirely change, but we do want to see that you understand what you're signing up for and what this program is going to be. Ultimately, all teams who apply to the build challenge proposal and meet those requirements will be invited to present their preliminary designs to peers and a panel of jurors at the competition event in April 2022. We expect to provide up to 20 teams that $50,000 each and an approval to proceed to the construction phase in the competition. The goal here is that we expect teams that have demonstrated that they completed their design and they know what they're doing and they have a strong structure of participation are able to receive those funds before they have to start construction so that they can move forward and build successfully to complete by April of 2023. So ultimately, we got some advice from former competitors. Apply early, think about who your partners are, think about your local utilities, look for in-kind products and services. Really think about how you're going to tell your story, your images, your team involvement. Leverage some of the work that Solar Decathlon has done in the past to help sell your idea. When you can, again, COVID aside, try to get those face-to-face meetings, get in front of the person and show your team's excitement and visual images. And don't be afraid to network. As we mentioned, no Solar Decathlon team has been successful in doing this alone. I mentioned this earlier, and we'll make sure we send a link to everyone who signed in today. We did want you to look for the explanation of intent. We recorded about 5 learning videos for planning for 2023 with some advice about where to find resources on past construction drawings, project manuals, jury presentations that exist on solardecathlon.gov, to think about sponsorship, to think about how this can be engaged and incorporated into existing classes and some of these different areas. We'll show you some of the examples from our past Solar Decathlon Build Challenge competitions. And if you'd like to schedule a one-on-one call, I know we've done this with several of you before, please consider doing so and reach out to sdbuild@nrel.gov. And we're happy to have a one-on-one call with just ourselves, Holly, and you to understand what you're thinking, to give some feedback or brainstorm around how this could fit in your existing curriculum, your existing partnerships, or a local industry partner who maybe has some interest in supporting this type of program. With that, I went a little bit past the 20 minutes I planned, but I'd love to discuss what type of target markets are you thinking? What are you looking for in a partner? How big are you expecting for your team? From a funding point of view, we've seen teams participate in a wide range of scenarios, but particularly with the local built environment, what we saw some success around is what is the existing home? Who was going to pay for that? And so if it, for example, was a Habitat home, if their budget was X and it was planning to be built, what's the incremental investment necessary by your university and your partnership to bring that to become a net zero home, to bring that to become a highly performance, highly innovative zero energy home appropriate for the Solar Decathlon? Or otherwise, what might someone pay for these different activities? I'd love to open things up for any conversation that you might have or any questions. But real quick, as I know, I don't think the chat is available to everyone once who joined later. I'm just going to call out again real quick the nice mix of different schools that we have joining us on our call today. So I know I've heard from University of Central Florida, Marywood University, Rochester Institute of Technology, Cornell, Buffalo, Mississippi State, UCSD, Penn State Harrisburg, LTU, Jefferson University, Drexel University, CU Boulder, Northwestern, Tsinghua University in Shenzhen, China, UBC, Washington University, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, SUNY, Delhi, and some other opportunities. So with that, if anyone has any questions, we'd love to answer them. Or Holly, if you think I've skipped anything important, please let me know if you'd like to discuss anything else.
Yeah, Joe, one thing I would add is I think you mentioned and showed photos of an existing home retrofit from the University of Denver that was part of the competition this year. And we really do encourage folks to be thinking about those retrofit projects. That is really going to be an important part of national strategy for decarbonization moving forward. So we'd love to see students learning how to do that, to retrofit existing buildings to get to zero energy.
Great. I do see one question in the chat, a precedent of different universities partnering together to participate as one team. Absolutely. It's happened several times, sometimes very successfully, sometimes communications have fallen a bit flat. So I will say that one of our third place teams in the 2007 Decathlon was the University of Denver that partnered with, oh man, I just blanked on the other school. Berkeley, University of Berkeley. So then that partnership was really strong, where one school really helped with the construction management and the execution of the build, and the other school focused on the design and engineering areas. So one school had a much stronger construction management and build program, and a different school had a very strong engineering and architecture program. And by working together, they really ended up with a very strong project overall. We have seen several teams partner. Something that I will say as advice is to really think about roles and responsibilities and to think about that communication strategy. We've had some schools that were maybe a few hours away from each other, and the students struggled to have full engagement when they weren't able to be present on the build site, or they weren't able to collaborate in person. I know the world has changed in the last year, so maybe being very far from each other is not as big of a deal as it was before. But yes, we do encourage and we do see a lot of success in different universities partnering together. I would just caution you to think early on about how you're going to communicate successfully with each other and who's responsible for each aspect of the project. So this is a great question I see about deliverables that are aligned with each other. So yes, we're going to do our best as we create this next set of rules to allow this alignment of activities so that the program would conclude in spring of 2023, that we would have some presentations occurring in spring of 2022, and some of the design submissions required. So one may be construction drawings while the others are more design development drawings, but we do see some of that alignment. I do think there's a great opportunity for some schools to have both a design challenge team and a build challenge team. Recognize that it does take a lot of effort, but if you have some students or a studio that is focused on your mixed use multifamily or elementary or commercial style buildings, and you have a different group of students or schools who are focused on that residential scale for the build challenge, we welcome you to think about that. I would caution you that building a home is not an easy task. So really think about your available resources and not stretching yourself too thin. But otherwise, I'm going through that activity. I see a question too about the accessing reports from previous years. And so yes, so for the Solar Decathlon Build Challenge, we have released and we're updating for the year of 2020 the full set of final submissions that the teams provided. So this would be their construction drawings, their project manuals, their jury narratives, and some of these related elements. And as we go through the program, we also provide support along the way. So some examples or templates of what the deliverables might look like. We do have training resources just like in the design challenge. We will provide the building science education free of charge for all of the students who are able to go through that area. And we do want to see those students succeed. I see a question about the use of commercial products versus innovation. And I think that's always a nice balance. So as you look at the 10 contests that we have and you look at the explanation of intent, where we've tried to find this balance is the idea around innovation, not just for innovation's sake, but to solve a particular need. In the build challenge, something that you always need to balance is reliability and performance with the innovation. Because we're not just a juried contest, but we have measurements as well. Some teams may shy away from innovation because they're not confident that it's going to work when it needs to work to be measured to earn the points that they need in the competition to win. In the local build environment, though, for 2023, recognize that you have the benefit of installing it, testing it before we actually measure and evaluate it. So as long as you plan for that timeline in your schedule, I would more than welcome you to think about that innovation, just as so as you may also want to think about a plan B for if that innovation doesn't function the way that you think when you put that into your home. It's all a balance. It's a 10 competition contest, and all of those contests are unique. In the past, there was some strict requirements around how affordability was calculated that some could say could limit the focus on innovation. But right now, you'll see when you look at the 10 contests, we focus more on market analysis, innovation, market potential, and other elements. So as long as you can understand the story about that innovation and why you think it's the right approach moving forward, I think it's a great thing to consider including. So I'm going to go through here a few minutes. So I see a note about how we're structuring the program. So very excitingly, when we looked at the program for the Solar Decathlon 2020, pre-pandemic, we had actually incorporated a hybrid of both a national showcase with 6 units on the National Mall as part of the Smithsonian Folklife Festival, and we had 6 local build teams from the beginning, so beginning back in 2018. And so while it turned out that all 12 of our teams never transported their house to a central site, this is something that we've been very excited about for a number of years, and very excited to see how we're able to showcase these homes built in permanent foundations with local partners in a way that we think can be replicated and really can have impact on the community for a number of years to come. I see a question about how does the judging take into consideration varying regulatory environments, specifically varying building codes. And so ultimately what the Solar Decathlon has done is that we look at a standard Solar Decathlon building code that expects a minimum compliance with the latest International Residential Code and the IECC. And we've historically engaged and involved a building code inspector who reviews all those construction drawings, who looks at the process under construction and expects teams to build to that minimum level of standard. That may be better than the local authority having jurisdiction requires, but we would want those homes built to a modern standard and a modern building code. That is something to consider, that you can always build better than code, and we will do our best to evaluate those fairly and effectively across all of those teams. So think about not just when you understand how you're going to build this home successfully, how are you going to build a home that you're proud of? How are you going to build a home that's not just code compliant in your local jurisdiction, but that meets the expectations of this zero energy ready home standard of the Department of Energy and of the competition as a whole. I see a question as well about incorporating residential and some other uses to compete in that area. So a row home renovation embedded in a community park, which also includes retail, community kitchen, and some therapy spaces. Ultimately, what I would say is what we looked for in this competition, we would in the future, is how much we can have a fair playing field for all of our competing teams and for our measurements. How we're going to measure, for example, one of the measurements we did this year was the amount of water that passed through each of 3 fixtures before hot water was achieved at that faucet. And so if we're testing a community center that is 3,500 square feet against a 690 square foot small home, it's going to be hard to do that really effectively and fairly. So we are looking at, for the build challenge, a way in which we evaluate a single residential unit. It can absolutely be part of a bigger design. And like you may be able to consider, this portion is relevant to the design challenge. And then we're going to test and measure this particular unit of the row home development. We could absolutely do that. So we can think about what is the residential unit that we're going to measure and evaluate, even as it sits within a larger complex or a larger design. I see a question about the top 2 or 3 projects from now get more than $50,000. The history of funding for the Soul Decathlon has been very varied over the years. In early years, I think it was $5,000 per team. When it was on the National Mall in 2009 through 2011, maybe 13, I think it was $100,000 per team. And in this local recent format, you can see it in our prize distribution strategy. The national showcase teams that were expected to transport their houses to the National Mall as part of the Smithsonian Folklife Festival were at 130,000, and our local build teams for the 2020 Build Challenge were $25,000 a piece. And so as we look at the experiences and the lessons learned from the class of 2020, we found that that $50,000 increment to support all of these local build teams, so the 20 local build teams, are about $1 million in total prizes to be provided, is a way in which we can help to cover the incremental cost or the incremental way in which a building might be brought to participate in the Soul Decathlon. So of the students, of the additional innovations, of the materials, of the timelines of some of these different areas. And we recognize that $50,000 does not build a house. There's additional funds required. And so that's really up to each university to think very creatively about how to do so. And as much as we can provide advice, we're willing to do so. But unfortunately, we just don't have the ability to fully fund any of these houses. So that $50,000 per team for those 20 teams is where we're at this time. So I see a question. I'm going back a little bit. There was someone who said, how do you compensate when comparing different usages in different climatic conditions to your local areas? That's a great question and something we grappled with a great deal for this last edition of the 2020 Build Challenge. And in some ways, you'll see that we didn't measure total energy consumed of any one particular house. So in a different year, when all the houses were all about 870 square feet and they were all on the exact same site for the exact same 10 days, I could say, in order to get full points, your home has to do all these tasks and consume 175 kilowatt hours or less. And we could do that fairly because they were the same size house in the same climatic condition over the same 10 days. But we were unable to do that. So we looked at other things like evaluating energy efficiency, the ability to produce PV, the overall net zero analysis of that home, the grid responsive technologies, the ability to provide a temperature and healthy indoor environment. So it's not that every team was evaluated every 15 minutes for the total energy consumed, because we recognize that for one team, it may be winter, for the other, it might be a beautiful, moderate spring condition in which very little energy is required, and someone else might be the heat of their summer at 107 degrees. And so ultimately, the way we write those criteria are all around being able to provide the resources that a homeowner might look for in a modern dwelling. Can the home do the things that a home should do? And if you can show that it will, then the juries will evaluate the innovation and the appropriateness for all of these different elements for your particular target market and your target client. So in terms of the question around 150-mile-per-hour winds or other areas, I will say that the juries that we evaluate and we select are very much professionals in their field, and they're balanced. And so as long as they understand the design constraints and your team is able to convey why those constraints matter, then the unique activities of one home against another aren't going to be unfairly evaluated. So just like in any American Institute of Architects design competition, we're going to work with the jurors to understand that you can't say, I love that this house had such beautiful open air shutters. Why didn't the Miami house in this hurricane prone region have this same solution? We're going to trust some of the juries to understand some of those design constraints and different areas. I see a question around building science education. So what we've developed with the support of Department of Energy is a 10-hour course that's freely available that any student can go through and watch these short segments that cover the basics. The idea here is that any team that participates is able to get from 0 to 1, get across the finish line with a baseline level of information, even if the school that you're at or the faculty that are available don't have the depth of knowledge necessary in all of these different areas. So whether that's on HVAC design, it's on passive approaches, or it's on water mitigation, there's ways in which we can provide that baseline of building science education free of charge for anyone who's participating to help them understand that design process. Holly, did you have anything you wanted to add through all these questions? These are great questions. Thanks everyone for asking them.
No, I don't think so, Joe. Thank you.
Did I miss anyone? I've been trying to scroll up and down through this list. I really appreciate all the engagement and questions that you have. Michael, can you speak a little bit more about the building science education and the topics that are covered?
Yeah, sure thing. So hi, everyone. I'm Michael Young, Assistant Competition Manager for the Build Challenge. And I was also managing the development of this building science education course with our team. And yeah, Joe summarized it pretty well, but it's about a 10-hour course covering a number of different modules of content, kind of like chapters in the textbook. And we tried to design the course so it's these bite-sized 5 to 15-minute long episodes that cover really specific topics within these broader topic areas. So it starts with some of the really basic fundamentals of just how energy is used in the United States, where it goes, the different forms of energy that are used in buildings. We talk about the physics of energy versus power. A lot of those fundamentals, just to make sure everyone has the right vocabulary and speaking the right energy language going into the other modules on things like building envelope and HVAC and lighting and plug loads, renewable energy and so on. But it's a really good resource, I think, for as Joe said, to get people from zero to the point where they can confidently compete in this competition and gain those fundamentals to take part in something like the Solar Decathlon.
So not seeing any other questions. Some resources that are worth looking at if you haven't done so already. We have some very interesting summaries of the individual teams that participated in the Build Challenge, but particularly on the Solar Decathlon page in the Build Challenge area, you can see that explanation of intent that walks through some of that structure, the expected contests, how some of those measurement activities might occur. And we'll also show you that we are going to have in this teams area resources that show all the construction drawings, the jury narratives, and other elements. But particularly if you look backwards as well, you can look at some of those examples of the submission. So if you want to see a former team's full set of construction drawings, you can do so for University of Nevada, Las Vegas. You could do so for some of these other teams that can really help you understand, what would be necessary to successfully go through this entire project. And you can also see the approach that each team took towards innovation, architecture, communications, or some of these different areas. And if you haven't seen it before, this is the virtual village that I mentioned earlier. And if you want to understand how some of these constructions come together, something that's interesting to think about is what's the responsibility of your university and what's the responsibility of your partners, and how do you do so in a way that you're confident in your ability to be able to complete that project. And so for this particular team, you'll see that the construction is still underway, but what's interesting is that the university was able to do panelized systems that were built in an architecture studio at the university campus, and then bring them to the other central site, and then partnered with another builder to be able to do some of the mechanical work, interior finishes, and other areas. There's benefits and trade-offs to that type of partnership, but from a role of education and a role of what you want those students to do, you can think about what can our university do on campus? How do we do so safely? How do we do so in a way that we are confident that our students will be learning, that our students will be understanding some of the different innovations and different elements. I know we have someone from University of Nevada, Las Vegas on this call, but there's also some interesting approaches as terms of what's the responsibility within your university. And so is there an engineering-led team? Is there an architecture-led team? And how do you integrate this into, I'm going to try to jump to the
Joe, while you're finding that, I'll
Yep.
pop in really quickly also on the partnerships piece that I thought was really interesting this time around in the 2020 competition. We had a number of teams that developed partnerships that really give them the potential to scale their design. So it's not necessarily going to be one house that's built, but possibly a neighborhood of homes or multiple neighborhoods of homes. And I think those are, as this becomes more feasible, zero energy is not a thing that's far off in the future, it's a now thing. And as that becomes more feasible, looking at the potential to scale of working with developers, working with Habitat for Humanity that might replicate over and over again your design becomes really interesting and compelling. And we saw that over and over again in the 2020 competition.
Any other questions? I know we have just a few minutes left. I'm trying to watch the chat as well, but hopefully this is helpful as you all consider participating. As we mentioned, from the resources point of view, if you would like to have a one-on-one conversation, please reach out to us, sdbuild@nrel.gov. We're happy to just understand. We were thinking about this type of use case. What if it was a living lab in our partnership with the School of Medicine? What if we worked with this local architect? Could we do this as a townhouse development? If so, what would we evaluate? What if we want this to be built on campus as a temporary structure? Would that be allowed? What if we wanted to renovate an existing, a single unit of an existing 6-story condominium building? Could we do a condo in an existing building? Let's have that conversation and really think about how we would do so successfully and what would be the way in which we would evaluate that fairly across all of our competing teams. If you're an international school and you have challenges or concerns about the timelines we've discussed, let us know. I know we've had conversations with Australia and New Zealand and trying to understand what their academic calendar looks like versus the US's academic calendar and how this fits within their environment successfully. Reach out. We're happy to have this conversation. We still have the flexibility and the willingness to understand your interests, needs, and excitement so that as we try to build the Solar Decathlon to have greater impact with industry, with these builders, with the students, with the partnerships with architecture firms, engineering firms, manufacturers, or other areas, that we can say, how do we integrate innovation of the universities with the practicality and scale of the existing industry and showcase what's possible wherever you might live. It's not just transporting that house to a central environment, but you're showing this can work in Ogden, Utah, as shown on my screen. This can work in rural Kansas. This can work in China. This can work in the Netherlands, whatever that might be. So hopefully you're intrigued, hopefully you're excited, and please reach out to sdbuild@nrel.gov with any questions or to schedule that one-on-one call. With that, I'll do a last call for questions, but thank you all for participating. Really appreciate it. Taylor, do you want to bring up the final slide? Maybe we lost Taylor, but oh, she's coming back. There she is. It's not that great of a slide, but it is a final slide, so we have it up.
Thanks for joining, everyone. Please keep in touch.
Thanks so much. Bye.